Hi, good afternoon. So I'm going to talk about the future of architecture. So we are now living in a whole new realm of architecture. We live in a complex world where our architecture has to respond to the greater forces of urbanization. And on a limited planet, this urbanization reflects in a constant struggle with nature. That nature also includes us, humanity. And increasingly, we have less space for less people to live in a decent and healthy way. There's a lot of people on this planet still that doesn't have a proper home to live in. And we are going to be able to not provide the same amount of space to everybody on this planet as we become more urbanized. The very fabric of architecture and how we build it is going to need to change because it is not sustainable. And the amount of energy that we need to power architecture also needs to change because we can't afford to generate that amount of energy. But the saving grace is we are in an era of new technology. And that new technology is really leading us to a whole new future of architecture. So today, I want to share with you some of our work and some of the trends which we think may be the new future architecture that we'll be building on this planet. The first I will call as mega architecture. Why it is mega is we are facing mega urbanization problems. This project you see on the screen is called the Technosphere, and it's here in the UAE. And it's designed as a city without roads, a city without the sprawling mass of buildings normally taking up a lot of land. Instead, we compress 40,000 people to live and work effectively using half the amount of energy, using half the amount of water together in a more compressed city. But in doing so, this architecture unleashes possibilities to open up public space outside the technosphere for everybody to share. So mega architecture to deal with mega problems. Buildings themselves will become more smart, and we call these smart architecture. No longer would they just be buildings that people occupy, but buildings will become the hardware and the software that empowers new kinds of lifestyle. This particular building is called the iPad building in Dubai. It's been completed, and it's designed just like an iPod. This architecture inside empowers the people to live a technologically driven lifestyle. For example, a limited space apartment inside has virtual reality that allows that limited space to go beyond the limited dimensions of the architecture, so you can perceive the space as bigger or to a dislocated location anywhere in the world. And also, even in the bathrooms, the mirrors actually monitor the state of health of all the occupants in this building. So the architecture is no longer just your home, but it's a home that takes care of you and monitors the state of your well-being. Architecture will take on a sensory role. They will not only just be buildings, but there will be devices within our urban landscape that allows us to understand the constantly changing dynamics of our environment. These are examples of smart lampposts that we're doing around the world. They gather big data on an active real-time level and shares that with the public and with the government so that a city can be better managed. So again, architecture is playing a role to be self-organizing, self-monitoring, and self-sensing. I think one of the really big forces that's coming into architecture is transportation architecture. Transportation architecture will entirely disrupt and change what we see as scale in a city. So I've been working on Hyperloop, and it will start construction here in Abu Dhabi. And the Hyperloop, as a piece of architecture, compresses the extreme distances and time constraints that we often feel in our daily life because we're used to the normal kinds of architecture of cars and trains. Once these architectures are achieved, entire nations will be seen at a different scale. And architecture will play a role in a way to accelerate and also to compress the time and distance constraints of our physical planet. Apart from all of those high-minded and big visionary ideas, we must bear in mind that as more and more people live on this planet, there's going to be an issue of the challenges of affordability. How do we build architecture that people can really afford to live in? So recently, we've started a project to convert concrete water pipe into affordable housing, and it's called the O-Pod. Each O-Pod is 140 square feet of living space, and all can be created for less than 12,000 US dollars. It's extremely safe, extremely resilient, and now we are having the opportunity to build O-Pod settlements around the world. Just last week, the Hong Kong government granted me a piece of land for $1 to build the world's first affordable O-Pod settlement for young people who can't afford to live in our traditional architecture, to be able to live in a transient way inside these affordable architecture. And I believe another major trend in architecture is the very fact that we won't be building it in the same way. Traditionally, architecture is built from the ground up. You have to pour concrete, you have to have rebar. But now, we're going to move into an era of modular architecture, where buildings are built like cars in a factory, using robots and production lines. This is a real project we're doing at the moment called the O-Pod, a building that is created out of modular aluminum pods, which are highly created automatically in a factory, and then they can be plugged into a building. This building is scheduled to be in Chicago. And the future is just arriving. So I believe the next generation of what we call architecture will not only be the stationary building, but they will become autonomous architecture. Autonomous architecture in the same way that we have seen with cars taking us from place to place. Autonomous architecture is able to move itself to reflect to the climatic and economic conditions of place, to allow people to deploy their homes or settlements in light of natural disasters or the need to change a city dynamically to the needs of the population. This is all going to be possible, and it's coming faster than we can ever imagine. So in closing, I would like to say that architecture has always been just about buildings. But today, in this day and age, we're entering into a new kind of architecture that brings together the expertise of technology, new smart materials, new knowledge, new data, and together that smart architecture is evolving into what I call a cybertecture. Thank you very much.